Number 1. I had a football coach back in high school who was also one of my teachers for a semester. When he was a lot younger and newly married, he had a coaching job at a small college in Montana. He said that after practice one evening, he was making his long commute home, and the road ran alongside just fields and fields of hay and grain. Since it was late summer, early fall, it wasn't even approaching dark yet. His vehicle was an old, beat-up truck with just a bench seat. Anyway, he's driving along when he sees a hitchhiker on the shoulder. This being back in the day in small-town Montana, my teacher pulled over to let the guy in without a second thought. The man was described as wearing a really old, outdated style of suit. Not quite a zoot suit, but styled in a similar baggy way. He also had a big, stylish hat. Basically, this guy looked like he was straight out of the 40s. My teacher thought it was weird that he was so overdressed, it being so hot outside and all. But maybe that was the only clothing he had. So the guy gets in next to my teacher without a word. My teacher asks him where he needs to go, and the guy just points forward. My teacher tried talking to the guy, just trying to make simple conversation. But the guy wouldn't speak or even acknowledge him. He just pulled his hat down like he was sleeping. Out of nowhere, the guy just tips up his hat, looks out the window and says, "Stop the car, now." My teacher pulls over and lets him out, not wanting to offend a possibly crazy man. The guy stands on the side of the road for a second, and then, at a dead sprint, just runs off into the field beside the road, until my teacher couldn't see him anymore. He waits there for a while, thinking maybe the guy had the runs or something, and didn't want to shit next to the side of the road. After a long enough wait, my teacher gets back in the truck, and starts to accelerate back on the road. The thing about really old trucks is that they don't accelerate very fast. As my teacher got back on the road, he looked in his rearview mirror for a safe merge. But there wasn't a car in sight. What there was the hitchhiker, on all fours like an animal, running or crawling after the truck at an inhuman speed. Meanwhile, my teacher is beginning to fishtail as he attempts to go faster. The whole time his eyes are glued to the mirror, watching the man chase after his truck. Eventually, he was able to get up enough speed and lost sight of the guy in his mirror. When he was able to stop at a gas station to use a payphone, he called his wife at home to tell her the story and to lock up the house. She thinks he's just messing with her and that he's been talking with her co-worker. When he asks why she would think that, she tells him that in the office in town where she works, one of her co-workers told her a story of the exact same thing happening to them. Apparently, it's a well-known urban legend in that town. She thought it was just folks pranking the new girl at work, since she had to drive home alone at night. My teacher assures his wife he's not lying, and that he hasn't been talking to her co-workers or anything. She evidently believes him, and can vouch for her side of the story, because she showed up to one of our fundraisers, and I asked her about it. Now I just avoid lonely roads in Montana. Number 2. On the little island I grew up on, there was a story of a beast that would come into your home late at night and fiddle with your kids. It turned out to be true. He entered homes at night, dressed in a rubber mask and nail-studded wristlets, attacking women and children. It went on for a period of 11 years from 1960 as the beast roamed the island. They caught the guy in 1971. His name was Edward Paisnell, better known as the Beast of Jersey. Here's a picture of him, and the mask he wore. There's even a book about him, written by his own wife. Some urban legends really do end up being true. Number 3. Recently on Reddit, there was a discussion about the creepiest urban legends from around the world. One user brought up El Silbón, known as the Whistler in English, an emaciated figure that stalks and eventually kills people, particularly men. Its presence is marked by an eerie, continuous whistle. After reading this, other users were quick to draw parallels between this and a mysterious post from another user, made 4 months ago in a thread about creepy personal experiences. The following story is the experience he shared. I've been waiting a long time to tell the full story of the Whistler. This story requires many details, but it's unexplainable, creepy, and 100% true. I also have video evidence. When I was about 8 years old, my mum and I were taking our dog for a walk through the neighborhood. We live next to a swampy, wooded area on the edge of our neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. I remember it being very silent and slightly windy. From down in the swamp, we heard somebody whistling at us. It sounded sort of like a bird, but each whistle was so different that it sounded human-like due to the lack of consistency. The whistle sounded higher and then lower. I can't really describe it accurately. My mum had a concerned, slightly terrified look on her face and grabbed my hand, saying that we should go inside quickly. I didn't really understand because I was so young, but seeing my mum freak out like that made me freak out too. After a while though, I kinda forgot about it. 2 years later, I was taking my dog out again late at night. There's a large bush next to our front door that could easily obscure a person standing behind it. As I was finishing the walk, the whistling noise started again. The same pitch, the same inconsistency, the same human-like tones. It was identical. As soon as I heard it, a chill went down my spine as I remembered exactly the feeling of seeing my mum, terrified, looking down into the swamp at something I couldn't see. I ran inside as quickly as possible. Years went by, and I thought about it less and less. I told only a handful of people, and eventually it slipped from my mind. Fast forward to last summer. I'm 24, and I started dating my girl, Sarah. We moved out to South Dakota for work. For Independence Day, we decided to go to Pierre and watch fireworks along the bank of the Missouri River. There was a free camping spot behind a hospital where you could pitch a tent, hang out, and see the fireworks. We were near the end of the campground, and there were very few people around us. As it was getting dark, the fireworks began. They were pretty far away, so the illumination they brought was very little. We had to sit right at the edge of the river to be able to see them. A huge thunderhead was moving in, and a storm was imminent, so the air seemed electric, and the wind was picking up. The atmosphere was eerie, to say the least. The police boats herded all of the other boats off the river, and had left our area to do that elsewhere. Most of the other campers walked up the river to get a better view of the fireworks, but Sarah and I stayed back, and were drinking PBR Tallboys. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a paddle methodically dipping into the water. We turned to look, and saw a figure steering a canoe about 20 meters offshore. Sarah decided to go and get some more beers from the car, leaving me alone to stare at this mystery person. And then, of course, they started whistling at me. My entire body was frozen and covered in goosebumps. It was the exact same whistle from my childhood, more than a decade earlier. I looked at the figure, but it was much too dark to discern who it could be. They were wearing a hat. That's about all I could make out. When they were perpendicular to the shore, they stopped paddling, turned the canoe to face directly at me, and whistled right at me. I was so frightened I stood up, and I shouted, "Who are you?" They didn't say anything, just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe 180 degrees, and paddled out of sight. I'm a videographer, so I already had my camera by my side, and was taking video of the fireworks. As the canoe was almost out of sight, I grabbed my camera and got a shot of them whistling as they went away. When Sarah came back from getting the beers, she was very confused as to why I was so freaked out. When I explained, she was freaked out a bit as well. I was so convinced we'd both be murdered that night. How did this whistling person follow me, after 14 years, all the way to South Dakota? Was it a coincidence? The whistling was the exact same, no mistaking it. It was so unnatural. Who was that person and where did they go? So many questions still unanswered. To this day, I'm still afraid of being outside in the dark, where I might hear that whistling again. This person's haunted me since I was a boy. I can't explain it. Here's the video I took. I was too afraid at that moment to point directly at the canoe, so I just turned my microphone towards it and kept a low-key shot facing down the river towards the fireworks. If you wear headphones, you can hear it better. In the last shot, I boosted the brightness as much as I could. You can see the person in the canoe. It looks like they're wearing a red sweater or something. I later showed my mum the video and asked her about that night when I was little. She said that she had absolutely no recollection of it. To me, that makes it even creepier. Number 4. I live in Northern Australia, and everyone growing up in my town knows the legend of the Poinciana Woman. A quick Google search will elaborate into the many variations of the story, but the one I grew up knowing is that a woman was raped by Japanese fishermen, and she ended up hanging herself from a poinciana tree after she found out she was pregnant. She's said to appear as a beautiful woman to entice men, with long dark hair, and dressed in a white gown, and is said to be situated at our army reserve. When I was around 12 years old, and my brother was 10, he had been in his room, and I was in the lounge on the computer. He came barreling out from his room, screaming, "Can you hear that?" He dragged me over to the window. There was a faint, feminine moan or hum. We could hear it moving from the window as we stood there, to the one across the room, and back in a clockwise direction. This moaning was in the same room we were. The wind outside had picked up with the noise, despite how still the night had been up to that point. The sound became so loud that we were on the floor, covering our ears, crying. When I brought it up recently with my brother, he agreed that it was almost like the sound was in our heads. This went on for about 10 minutes, before abruptly stopping. No wind, no moans, nothing. We found out the next day that our older siblings had been at the army reserve that night, and had climbed the concrete pillars to the locked gun turret, and had, in a way, been taunting the Poinciana Woman. They eventually left after hearing footsteps, assuming it was security. What creeps me out the most is that not long after this happened, I realized that we had a Poinciana tree outside of that window. Number 5. During my 3rd year in Japan, I lived way up in the woods, north of the town I worked in. There's a narrow winding road, with a river on one side and a steep mountain on the other. The road's so narrow that there's places to pull over and wait if another car's coming. One night, I'm heading home after work, keeping in mind that if a car's coming towards me, I'd have to pull over. I'm heading north, with the river on my left and the mountain to the right. I get to this spot where the road curves to the left, and there's a big rock on the left side of the road as well, which has a small shrine in it, right where the curve is. I see the car lights of a white Taurus-type car just to the left of the rock, and it's coming from the other side, so I pull over to wait for them to pass. I keep waiting for them to come around the rock, but they never come. Weird. But there are a few buildings up there. Maybe they pulled in just as the rock obscured my vision of them. I head home without thinking much about it. Later that night, I get the munchies, and the only store was back south in the main part of town. So I'm driving south this time, and I come to the same corner, and I see the same white car just past the rock shrine, coming north towards me. This time I'm by the buildings, and I pull over to wait for him to pass. But no car comes. This is really weird, because on the north side, there are places a car could disappear, but on the south, there's absolutely nowhere to go. Only a steep mountain on one side, and the river on the other. As I ease around the bend, nothing. No car to be seen. So this sticks with me until one day in October. I'm teaching a culture lesson about Halloween in the local junior high. The subject of ghosts come up, and I jokingly say, "Hey, I think I saw a ghost. Do you know the road that goes north with the shrine?" Screams of terror come from half the class, like total panic. Girls are crying, guys are shouting, and the Japanese teacher's gone deadly white. Some are literally moaning for me to stop over and over. I was floored at the reaction. It turns out that that rock was a dangerous spot on the road, but was unable to be removed due to the shrine. It was believed that removing it would offend the gods there. People freaked because there was absolutely no way I could have known about it. I've left a Google Maps link in the description for anyone who wants to see the road where this took place. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. There's so many urban legends from around the world that it's kind of hard to keep up with them all. But I guess that's a good thing, you know, because there's so many still left to hear about. And hey, variety's the spice of life, right? So I'm not complaining. Anyway, what are some of your favourite folkloric tales and legends? Share them down in the comments, because I'm sure a lot of people would be really interested in hearing about them, you know, myself included as well. And hey, while you're down there, why not drag your little mouse cursor over the like button and just give it a little click. Come on, you know you want to. Anyway, I'll have another video coming to you guys very soon. But until then, stay spooky, and remember, the best things happen in the dark.